Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hello Hot Flash, where we help you control the midlife change. I am so excited to be here with two guests today. They were both so awesome. I had to bring them together. And when you guys hear the message they have for us, you're going to run into HR and be like, listen to this podcast. We need for you to change some stuff. So I'm super excited. Again, Sophie and Luce, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And again, we as women, we need to learn how to advocate for ourselves. So, what we're going to talk about today is menopause in the workplace. And so, again, I'm so super excited. But before we get started, I want to introduce both of my guests. Today, I have with me Sophie Cartledge and Luce Beaulieu. I'm working on my French accent, you guys. Sophie is a menopause trainer and coach for Hormones on the Blink. She is passionate about raising awareness of perimenopause and menopause, particularly in the workplace, to enable a more positive experience. Sophie delivers awareness sessions, CPD accredited training, and support within the community. And Luce is passionate about transformation, and she believes that we can all learn to navigate midlife and the menopause transition meaningfully and with dignity in order to become and support the conscious leaders this world needs. Both women have a very unique calling. They're interested in making perimenopause and menopause, the conversation, a part of our everyday lives. And they're doing an amazing job at that. So again, thank you both for being here. I'm going to start by having you guys, again, we kind of had a pre-coaching session here, and I told them to just jump in. I'll ask some questions individually, but I want it to be as engaging as possible. So if there's something that comes up for you guys, please just interject. So I'm going to start by having you both introduce yourselves and provide some background on your work as it is related to, I need to learn how to talk today. This is like my fourth interview, as it's related to menopause in the workplace. Luce, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. So my background this is my fourth career, actually. Without going into detail about the first 25 years of my life, I ended up in a situation a few years ago where I was going myself through the menopause transition, and it was very, very, very hard. The workplace that I was at the time was not only not supportive, but was actually detrimental to my health. From that experience and from, kind of like the deep initiation, like also the spiritual side of the menopause transition, things kind of like really switched for me. And that's when I realized that the mission that I really wanted to dedicate myself to was to really support women through this transition, enable women to, not only remain in their jobs, but also develop their leadership for themselves, but also for the world that we live in at the moment. So the way that this translates is, I do one-on-one coaching. I also do consulting, and more, I really want to offer support to women in the workplace and to workplaces themselves, because I feel like the topic of perimenopause and menopause is really just an extension of women's whole life cycle, which starts, of course, when we're born, but then, when we get our first period and menarche, and then during our fertile years, whether we choose to have children or not. And then menopause is just like the natural end of those fertile years. And it really needs to have the attention that it deserves. The same way that, at least in Canada, 30 years ago, there was like a big revolution around, mothers having, paid parental leave and a lot of support that came around that. We need to have the same revolution around menopause and the support that women need going through this phase of life, because it's inevitable. Every woman is going to go through it. And by that age, pretty much most women are working. So it's really just kind of like a no-brainer that there should be some support and there should be some allocation and some care given to by workplaces to women on this topic.
I appreciate that. Sophie, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Yeah, so a bit like Luce, my background really was completely different to what I do now. So my background was kind of in recruitment and in training. My kind of journey, if you like, on perimenopause and menopause started very much with my own experience. I was 40. It kind of hit me like a bit of a truck, I would say, right between the eyes. It impacted my work life. It impacted my personal life. It kind of affected everything.
I had the usual, offered antidepressants from GPs, the lack of support. Everyone I spoke to said you're far too young. And when I looked into, we have got a Menopause Matters forum, there's hundreds of thousands of women on there that have all gone through the similar situation. Some of them have had to leave work. Some of them, their relationships have broken down. Their families have fallen apart. And I felt so angry, actually, that why were we being left? It's almost like, were you fallen off this cliff and you're just supposed to stay there and kind of waste away, right? And this is not okay. We're in 2020, whatever we are. Like, we didn't land on the planet yesterday. We've been here the whole time. We need to do something about it. And it was out of like Luce, personal experience that I guess gave me the passion and the drive to, how do we reach as many women as possible? How do we create the most impact? For me, I felt that's very much through the workplace, and that we can have a double-edged sword to that, if you like, in the sense that it's not only helping the individuals remain in jobs that they love, but it's helping the organisations not lose those individuals and all that goes with that, all of the experience. But I also have a big passion for helping women in the community as well. So I do support groups and things like that outside of the workplace.
Awesome. So the three of our stories, and the folks have heard my story over and over, clearly tell you that life does not end after menopause. Life does not end during the menopause transition. Like, really great things can come out of this time period. And to get the employer to recognize that we're just like at our peak at that point, and there's so much wisdom that they need to understand what's going on so that they can support us more. So thank you guys both for those introductions. Luce, talk to us a little bit, speaking of employers, talk to us a little bit about why it's important for an employer to address menopause and then create a supportive environment for their employees.
As I mentioned, because it's just like the natural continuation of a woman's life cycle, right? It's inevitable. So any organization that has, women employees or managers or directors that are in their late 30s or in their 40s, and they want to keep them, which is usually what organizations want to do, it just seems natural to me that they would want to support these individuals in the job that they've been hired to do and that they put value on. So it's really just economically, to me, just makes sense. You would want to, if you've already invested in a person, whether through training, hiring, over the years, the interrelationships that this person has created, all the projects that they've brought in, the return on investment that they're certainly generating, it would just make sense that an organization would want to invest. So that's more like kind of like the no-brainer kind of ROI type of equation that any organization should be looking at. And then the other part of that is organizations that are looking at equity, diversity, and inclusion. We're talking a lot about, different topics like whether you're part of the LGBTQ plus community, around different experiences culturally, around gender, et cetera. But also, why don't we talk about, menopause, and why shouldn't that be also a topic in any kind of like an EDI HR policy? It's certainly like a little bit of a stretch. It certainly requires some understanding and some knowledge, but those are all things that can be easily acquired. And this is what Sophie and I want to bring to organizations, is to make it clear, to make it simple, to bring in the right information, and to just make sure that whatever you're implementing in your organization to support your people is going to make sense, is going to actually be supportive, and is going to be, as I mentioned in the beginning, generating return on investment.
And when you start talking about ROI, ears tend to perk up a little bit more. So if we have to go in the door that way, let's go in the door that way. But you're right. There's been a shift, I know, at least in the United States, around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and making this part of the conversation. I don't think it ever came up. It doesn't feel as if it came up for anyone. It's like menopause. Why would we talk about that and talk about DEI at the same time? But it's so utterly important. So thank you guys for what you're doing. Sophie, tell us a little bit about how your organization, how you work to integrate menopause awareness and support into workplace wellness programs, because I know you've worked with some well recognizing organizations on doing that work?
Yeah, so it's a variety of stuff, really. Sometimes it might start from, I'm going to say, like the very, the bottom of, let's implement a policy. It might be that there isn't a policy in place yet. So it might be about, what does that look like? Let's get a menopause policy in place, or perhaps reviewing one that is already in place, because sometimes they're not always as inclusive as they could be. So sometimes they can be reviewed to make them more include. For example, I've seen a number that talk about perimenopause as happening in the 2 years prior to menopause. I don't know where the 2 years came from, right? But like,
I wish it was
so
that short.
right, I know. So it's just those things, like glancing an eye over, okay, could we make this policy more inclusive? How do we tie it into other policies? How do we tie it into the health and safety, the ED&I policy, so that the tone of language for the organisation is, the same throughout, if you like. And then sometimes what we do with organisations is actually assess where they are currently. So that might look like an employee survey of how it's perhaps impacting individuals, how comfortable they might be discussing that with their line manager, what support is already there. So it gives you like a really good overview of, okay, where are we right now? And then where do we focus attention, our resources, our budget? Is it support for employees directly? Is it training for the managers? Where do we need to go with it? And then kind of putting a plan in place so that that's kind of coherent, let's say, throughout the next year, or 12 months of what they want that to look like.
What I didn't mention is Sophie's in the UK, Luce is in Canada, and you guys know that I'm in America. There's so many differences. It feels to me as if the UK has gotten it right, or they're closer to getting it right than Canada, and Canada's closer to getting it right than the United States. Can either of you speak to those differences, or why do you think that's happening?
That is a really good question, and it's so interesting kind of hearing your perspectives. I know we've spoken about it before, the differences in the States, the differences in Canada, because in the UK, it feels very frustrating because we don't feel like we're where we need to be yet. And yet we have obviously made some progress. In all honesty, I think the reality of how that has come about in the biggest way is having celebrities talk about it. And I know that that's something that's happening, isn't it, in the States with Oprah and things like that. It's those people make the headlines, those people start or shout about the campaigns. And then now maybe people are taking it a bit more seriously. And it's a shame that it has to be dependent on that. But that, I think, is what it's taken in the UK. I don't know what it's like for you, Luce.
I really wouldn't say that it's very progressive either, in Canada, in terms of, workplace policies. When I was going through the thick of my own transition, I was desperately looking for support. And out of desperation and curiosity, I turned to Instagram. And that's how I found, you, Sophie. And that's how I realized also that there was this, from my perspective, this huge kind of like renaissance of the importance of the menopause topic in the UK. And I realized there was like political movements, and there were foundations and charities and clinics and coaches, and which still to this day does not really exist so much. I mean, it does, but not to the extent that from afar that I'm seeing in the UK. And what happened was, over the next, 18 to 24 months, I saw that the topic was starting to gain a little bit of traction in Canada, which is no surprise because in many ways, the UK is between 5 and 10 years ahead of Canada in all manners of topics. So it's really just a question of time at this point. And you're right, in terms of people who are well-known or famous talking about this. I'm specifically in a province called Quebec, which is a predominantly Francophone province. And so over here, there's a woman called Véronique Cloutier who created like a 3-part mini-series about her own experience and about the fact that there's no hormonal therapy that's readily available, and it should be reimbursed by the state, et cetera, et cetera. And that brought the topic at the political level as well as at the societal level in terms of conversations, but that has also kind of like abated a bit. Like if it isn't fed, if it's not constantly in the headlines, at some point, the topic kind of like fades away a little bit. However, what's helpful, unfortunately, is that all of the Gen Xers, I think we're all Gen Xers here, we advocate for ourselves and we're all in that age bracket of menopause, and we're not going to go down without a fight, right? Like we are going to be advocating for ourselves and we're going to be implementing change. And so this is also what it's about. It's about being part of this sea of change that has arguably started in, I would say, in the UK, and then like Commonwealth countries have, are following. And the great thing and the horrible thing about the United States is, capitalism, which, is great because you can start businesses and you can start movements, and bad because, it can be oppressive for many people. But I'm seeing in the States actually so many things happening. Not Kate Blanchett, the actress who started the company called Stripes. I'm blanking on her name, of course.
Naomi Watts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, which created like a huge hubbub. And then like there's all these other platforms, like health platforms that are appearing. And it's all happening in the States. And in Canada, where there's universal healthcare, the good thing is that there's universal healthcare. And the bad thing is that doctors have probably the equivalent of 2 days of, training on hormonal therapy and on menopause. So, all these different situations geopolitically, I think it leads to where we are here, where, we're at the front line. And we are at the point where we're realizing, well, we can't just be talking to women who actually have, the means to have like one-on-one coaching and people who are on Instagram and on social media, but we really have to be talking to the workplaces and have the workplaces who are like the big economic agents to be implementing this kind of change inside of their systems.
I love that. I love this conversation. Specifically to Luce, but Sophie, feel free to chime in. How can workplaces promote open conversations about menopause and help reduce some of the stigma that goes along with it?
Right. So it's, for me, I don't even remember how it's not a conversation because,
right.
I've been steeped in it for a number of years now. But I think it goes hand in hand with, probably having courageous conversations on any kind of topic. Right. So it's not just menopause. It's like, how do you have, courageous conversations about racial prejudice, about, people who are, gender fluid or don't, gender nonconforming? How do you have conversations about ageism and sexism? Right. So for me, it's a topic that goes into the anti-oppression and into the, pro-aging conversations more broadly. So it's really about being able to approach somebody with a lot of, self-compassion and compassion towards the other people, and really be interested, what's it like being you, right? What is it like? What is your experience? And to be able to receive what the person is going to be communicating to you. So it really goes back to just like basic, nonviolent communication skills, certainly some type of coaching skills as well, to be able to really listen and to be able to create these spaces that are safe psychologically for people. The underpinnings of all of this is to really work on like, is there a climate of psychological safety in an organization? And can I create these bubbles where people actually feel safe talking about these things?
That's good. That's really good. So if you talk to us about some DEI, especially in the States, it's again huge right now. You can go on Indeed.com and find a DEI open position. They're also letting a lot of them go now, but it's there. So talk to us about what steps HR professionals need to take in order to ensure that these menopause-related topics are included in their workplace diversity and inclusion initiatives.
So again, I guess some of it, we've covered already, but it's about this, what they're considering in there. I mean, we call it in the UK, call it ED&I, so equality, diversity, and inclusion. There's so many different areas that fit within that, and it's ensuring really that menopause is on the agenda and that it's included in those policies, those conversations, as part of that, really. And, making sure that I think we spoke about this before, but the different departments are communicating with each other. So HR departments communicating with the ED&I departments, really listening to their employees of what their needs are and what their difficulties are, and taking those on board. Well, I just wanted to mention something going back to what Luce said as well. Within organisations, when you have people that are, let's say, they're at the top, if you like, and they're being open about their experiences, that just really helps to filter down within the culture of the organisation of, oh, it's okay to talk about this.
Yeah.
And, oh, we need to have that on the agenda, because I hadn't thought about that, but you know what, that person's really struggling with it. So I've, sat on calls where there's been all of the employees and the HR director, and the HR director has been open about her struggles in menopause and said, my door is open, come and speak to me. That is so refreshing. And it's about just being human, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
That positive top-down leadership, and having someone there in place that, as you said, understands what you're going through. So folks don't feel like they're, I don't know, on the outs some way, or there's something wrong with them because they have this problem or concern, and or even confused, like, what does this look like? So when you're working with HR professionals, give us an example or two. What does a policy change look like? Is it more flexibility, more different work hours? How does that look?
Yeah, so, well, sometimes it will be, for some people, it might be that they're offering, you can start later, because a lot of women struggle with night sweats, right? So if you're waking up 5-6 times a night, you're exhausted in the morning. So a lot of people will perhaps get their deep sleep from 5 o'clock onwards, and then, of course, their alarm's going off at 7.
We're all nodding our head like, yeah, I've been there too many times.
Yeah. So, a workplace could be really supportive in saying, do you know what, work later if you can work later, or work from home, because, if you've got to travel into work, you're losing perhaps an hour's travel time. Whereas if you can work from home, you could have a bit of extra sleep. You haven't got to be up and out. It can look like, if it's a uniform, we know about the kind of the normal things about changing the uniform. So it's not a man-made fabric, but something that's more breathable, and can be simple as, having a kind of sanitary products in the toilet, basic facilities almost, that are, that if you're caught unawares, because we know irregular periods, you can think you're not due. You could have not had a period for like 3 months, and suddenly you've got a period from nowhere. So it's not about like, well, she's a woman, why isn't she prepared? No.
I thought I was done with this.
Exactly. So a real range of stuff, and it's going to vary. When we talk to HR, we talk to managers, it's going to vary from what someone needs now to perhaps what they need in 6 months, to perhaps what they need in a year, because this is not linear, is it? It will change. So somebody might need a bit more support now. A year from now, they might come back to you and say, do you know what, I'm okay to let that, to go back to how we were, or actually, could we try this?
And so I know budget constraints often come up for companies, but those seem like super cost-effective strategies. We already know COVID was a curse and a blessing altogether. Now we know which one of our employees are really doing their job. And if we've seen that they can be productive at home, why not let them start a little later? Why not allow them to work from home? Why not spend, $10 on tampons to put those in the lavatories at work? So this is not asking employers to come in with a new $500,000 plan. To me, it sounds like it's asking employees to use common sense and to show respect for the people who are giving so much back to you. A lot of times you give more of your life to your company than you do to your own family, because you're there more in your waking hours. So yeah, I love that. I love this conversation so much.
That's so true. And I think there was a study done to actually ask women what support it was that they wanted from the workplace. And one of the key things that came up was about how was the understanding at work. And that I think it's like 20% of them wanted somebody they could just talk to, so a lot of what the average woman wants isn't extravagant. It's not costly, actually. It's about understanding, it's about education, it's about you giving them a little bit of your time just so they can say, I'm really struggling with this today, and then they want to go off and do their job.
I was just going to say, I think what we're talking about is really normalizing the experience of, of women going through it. And I certainly see it in my own clients, like I would say close to 50% of the work that I do is really just be there, listen, and validate and say, yep, I went through that. Yep, what you're going through, like 75% of women go through it. There's so little education around this topic, unfortunately, and so few public conversations that really just having, as you say, Sophie, one person that you can talk to, like maybe once a week or a few times a month, to say, this is what I'm going through, and to have like actual understanding and actual empathy and compassion, it really, really works its magic.
I'm happy you said that, because what solved my problem and helped me understand where I was is a conversation. Like no medicine, no, big theory of whatever. A conversation was had, and that allowed me to get the problem solved. So I loved that that was a cost-effective, very cost-effective way of handling this. For both of you guys, collaboration between departments is crucial. So this can't start in HR. Like you need to be able to be talking to the marketing department and other teams, because women are a part of all those teams. How can HR professionals and menopause educators work together? And how can you help the HR professionals work across the company and having those conversations?
I have a few ideas, but I feel like group conversations that cross disciplines and cross departments could be like a really good start. Something like a lunch and learn, where people from multiple departments can be part of the same conversation. And maybe, if it's somebody, like Sophie or me that have gone through these changes, and we ask questions and say, my experience has been that, X, Y, and Z. Who here has experienced the same thing? And to just like really create this baseline of, again, normalizing, people going through this, and having actually both men and women of all ages be part of this conversation makes it so that you don't stand out, because you're part of this group.
Beyond that, what are some other ways that a menopause educator works with that company?
So going on from what Luce said, so there's a range of things that you can do, from, like I mentioned, kind of assessing the current knowledge and the current kind of climate in terms of being able to have those menopause conversations. But something we do is we run like awareness sessions, so menopause awareness sessions. And what you find, as Luce mentioned, is that will be opened up to the company wide. So you'll have different people from different departments on it. Once you start that conversation, or once one person comes forward and says, I'm really struggling with this, then someone in another department will come forward and they've got a similar experience. And so you create this almost internal buddy system from the get-go, which is really useful. And then we do things like training line managers so that they know how to support their employees in the workplace, how to have those open conversations and how for it not to be awkward. Because, sometimes people are met with, I'm going to say, a bit of a wall of silence. And it's not because the manager doesn't want to help, it's because they don't know what to say. They don't want to say the wrong thing. And so silence is the safest option. Now, if you're a woman that's gone to your male manager, let's say, and been met with a wall of silence, well, you're not going to go back.
Right.
You're not going to want to repeat that experience. So it's really about helping people to understand, how they can help support their employees and how to have those conversations, and to kind of give them that confidence, really. It also that takes the pressure off of the HR department, because if everyone at work is just going to the HR department, they've got a job to do.
Right.
So it's about sharing that knowledge and that support within the workplace, so it doesn't all fall in one place.
What does the future look like? The future of menopause awareness and what's the evolution look like? Where are we going with this?
So much work that needs to be done. From what I'm seeing in the Canadian landscape, there are some champions. There's the Menopause Foundation of Canada that's doing really great work, more on the medical side and more on the side of kind of like normalizing symptoms, talking about hormonal therapy, advocating for doctors to have, proper training, all that kind of thing. In terms of work and DEI, I haven't seen one single organization really champion this. I've seen individuals who are consultants really champion this. And I think it's a really broad, market to put it in, marketing terms. But there's just like a lot of work to be done. I was talking to a group of about 25 business women a few months ago about this topic. And so many of them were, all of them were in their 40s or above. And so many of them were, their eyes were wide open. And we had like a 3-hour conversation, which, it was like largely went way over the time that we actually were supposed to have together. And they were all like, yes, this is so important and we need to do something about it. A lot of them were, they were like, I cannot see myself having these conversations with any part of the leadership of the organizations that I'm part of. So there's still a lot of stigma. There's still a lot to be done in terms of social norms, in terms of like talking about these things. There's a lot of stigma about women aging in society. And menopause is part of it. Menopause is like the actual word that means your fertility years are over. And so for a lot of women, there's lots of shame. There's lots of fear that comes around it. So before we can have sort of like logical, honest, courageous conversations, we really need to work through all of these emotional layers that women go through and that men, also go through, because we've all been socialized in the same way, whether we're men or women. So I see the work being on these two fronts. First of all, professionals, being able to provide services to organizations to, be working on policy, be working on conversations, be working on support, and, all the social norms changing that needs to actually also occur in terms of public conversations, the media, different organizations that provide the information to support all of this.
Sophie, any comments on that, the future?
Yeah, so I think, like Luce said, there's a huge amount of work to do, isn't there, in all of those areas. I think in the UK, so we've just had a document released by the British Standards Institute, and it was a kind of a menstruation and menopause guide for employers. So I think in the UK, and I've had kind of a number of meetings about this, is that organisations are going to be looking at how they actually develop not just menopause support and training, but actually kind of menstruation to menopause. So things like endometriosis, things like, polycystic ovarian syndrome will be taken on board, that there'll be more awareness of it, and which will be amazing, because that's what we need, don't we? We need the whole, as we've mentioned before, we have periods, the opportunity to have babies, and then we have menopause, and that's been left off the topic. And what we need actually is to join all these dots up to ensure that, I think over here, like it's something like, is it 7 years before somebody actually gets diagnosed with endometriosis? Now, if we had things like awareness in the workplace, that means less time off sick for women. It means that they're able to find out quicker what they've got. It's a win-win all round. But again, I think there's a lot of work to do, because we are a long way off from that. But it's great that they've identified it and released this document, so it's on the radar.
I love these conversations because probably even 5, maybe even 3 years ago, well, not 3, 5+ years ago, I would not have been sitting at my home on Zoom talking about periods, and interviewed someone about vaginal dryness last week. And just, because we've just been conditioned not to have these conversations, like almost put to shame for having these conversations. The fact that we're talking now, I think, is going to be key to us getting to where we need to go. It's going to take a while, because It's about
Yeah.
women, just to be honest. But the more we start having the conversations with each other, even if we can't have them maybe with a male manager, I think that bit of awareness helps us move forward faster. For me personally, did not have a clue that everything I was going through was perimenopause. It was presenting more like Addison's disease and a little bit like diabetes. And it was just so weird. If someone had mentioned perimenopause and I would have known to take these steps, I could have gotten support earlier. So again, I applaud both of you so much for not just taking it to the person or that one-on-one coaching, but expanding this information so that employers are more aware of what's going on, get it solved. And if nothing else, think about it, you can get the woman back to work faster. You know, if you just want to go that route.
Yeah.
You don't want to
If
go
nothing
with,
else.
yeah. If you don't want to go with we're caring, loving, want to help you, just get them back to work faster. All right, we'll go that route.
It's also on that as well is I often highlight the fact that the point that we're going through perimenopause, if we're in a relationship, if we've got children, they might be toddlers, they might be teenagers. So our partner, they also might be, let's say, at the top of their game in their career. So you've got like this very fine managed family situation going on. Suddenly perimenopause hits and you're trying to hold it all together, and maybe home life is becoming really difficult. You can't manage those things that you used to. You need some more support. What that looks like in a relationship, and what that then is like as a man who the wife might not understand or the partner might not understand what's going on. Where are they going for their support, for their education? If they are getting that in the workplace, that doesn't just benefit them when they're managing people, it benefits them at home. And, the highest amount of divorce is between this age bracket, isn't it? It's like 45 and 54. So it's basically what I'm saying is, don't just think about the women, think about everyone involved in that, because it has this knock-on domino effect.
Oh, I love that you brought that up. It is. And I think Luce mentioned it as well. We have to get the men in that room in those conversations as well. So everyone needs to be educated. I interviewed someone, it's been quite a while ago, but husband and wife, they got a divorce, same age bracket. And she was perimenopausal, but neither one of them knew. When he started to understand what menopause was and the impact it had on his wife, they got remarried. So that's how I know, right? That's how impactful knowledge can be, because wait, she's not crazy. This is something actually impacting her hormones. I need to support her. She needs more help. Let's figure all this out. When he got that bit of knowledge, got them married again. So I think that's powerful. Yeah.
It is.
So,
yeah.
Because that's the thing. If you don't know, you don't know how long it's going to last for. You don't know, you don't appreciate, actually, this woman doesn't hate me. It's not because she hates me, right? It's because she's really struggling right now. This is a lot for her. And maybe there's some stuff I could do to help, rather than like, my wife's gone, she's never coming back kind of feeling,
Right. And I think the helping helps with the recovery. It helps with, I shouldn't say, I hate diagnosis and recovering. Like, we're not sick, we're going through menopause, but it helps us through this menopausal transition if we have that supportive mate in place. And I think it helps me personally, it kind of helped make the time a little shorter, because I had help from other folks, like, oh, wait, something's going on. She's not feeling well. Let me take up this slack and so forth. So yeah, education is power. It's power. A lot of folks are listening, and you guys mentioned the Menopause Foundation of Canada, the British Standards. They have a new menopause guide. Besides those, what are other resources, books, organizations, including the work that you both are doing, that you can recommend for listeners?
I can certainly recommend Lara Bryden's book, Hormone Repair. It's kind of my Bible in terms of more the physiological hormonal side of things. In terms of more the emotional, mental, spiritual, kind of like mapping out of menopause as an experience, I can't recommend enough the book Wise Power by the founders of Red School. Sophie, I'm sure that you have a lot of different resources as well.
Yeah, I love those. I love got Lara Bryden's book. Also Maisie Hill. So she wrote Period Power, and perimenopause power. So period power is great for anybody that's got teenage daughters. It's like the information you wished you'd been handed, you know, and
Yes.
perimenopause. Like, why are we only understanding our bodies now, right?
That was so magic. And I'm like, and I'm not even having my period anymore, but I want to go back and have it so I can do it right and work in my superpower each week. And oh my God. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
She talks about seasons. She talks about the seasons of your cycle and how when you're in your spring and your summer, right, you could batch bake so that when you get to your winter week, I'm like, why have I only just found out about this now? Like, this would have been so helpful.
Yeah, cycle productivity, or like living according to your cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I literally found out about this as I was 6 months into not having my period anymore.
Yeah.
I found out in 2019. It was too late for me. But I will tell you, even though it doesn't, you can't use your cycle to determine. For me, I found there's still this 30-day rhythm that goes on. So I've been able to know that between certain dates, I just work better. Between certain dates, I feel like resting, I need to rest. But it took me journaling and calculating and kind of making a lot of really good notes, but you can still step into that power without your period. So I love that book. What are some other ones that you have? You had, yeah, both are Macy Hills. Yeah.
They're great. The other book I'm reading at the moment is, I haven't finished it, is Invisible Women, which is next my bedtime reading. So that is quite interesting from a kind of statistics, workplace kind of analysis of all the things in the world really that have been managed around men, you know, have been designed around men. And no wonder actually that things are kind of difficult for women, especially when we get to menopause. And Burnout by the Nagoski sisters.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. I really enjoyed also Jen Guntner's book, Menopause Manifesto.
Yes, I love that one. She talked about the feminist aspect and so forth. Yeah, our grandmothers and how that impacted. Yes.
I have to say, like, I read a lot more electronic publications. I do read books as well, but like I really love Hot Flash Inc. Anne-Marie McQueen, like she's really awesome. She's a Canadian journalist and she only talks about menopause now.
I interviewed her last week, Luce. So you gotta.
Oh, did you?
Yes, you gotta listen for that episode. Yeah, she's awesome. She's an amazing woman.
Great. And a book that's on my to read list is The XX Brain by Lisa Mosconi, because so many women, me included, we just get super stressed about like our cognitive functions really changing. And when you understand that your brain actually is going through an upgrade and like a reconstruction almost, you know, there's a lot of stress that just goes really down. And reading that book, even though I haven't read it yet, but I've listened to a lot of her talks and I follow her on Instagram, she really breaks it down in terms of the neuroscience of it. So there's a lot of, I think, a lot of power in that knowledge.
That's a great, I'm about halfway through that. And I love that book because she talks a lot in there about the dietary stuff, the stuff we get to do that's within our control that helps our brain. And I just feel like it's very empowering to know we aren't dependent on a pill, we aren't dependent on a product. There is so much we can manage stress, what we're putting in our bodies, how much we're exercising, and the benefit of our brain to doing those things that we've probably overlooked for our entire life.
One you said, Sophie, did you say Invisible Woman? Was that
Invisible
one?
Woman.
Okay.
Yes, yes. I can't remember the name of the author. I think it's Caroline's something. That's helpful, isn't it?
Is it Dr. Caroline Leaf?
No, I don't think that's it.
Okay. All right. I'll look it up. I'll make sure I get it in the show notes for folks. This has been amazing. I love this conversation. Can you both tell our listeners how they can find you?
So my website is emergence.co, immergence.co. I'm also found on Instagram under emergence.co as well.
Instagram, Facebook under Hormones on the Blink, and the website is hormonesontheblink.com. Yeah, I think I mentioned already, but workplace training, workplace conversations. We've also got e-learning for larger organisations that want to go about kind of training their employees, but in a cost-effective way. So yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch and have a chat, then please do.
I love that. Any final words, either of you?
I'm just really looking forward to the next 10 years to see how all of this evolves. Like I mentioned, there's so much work, but I also feel like there's a lot of momentum and things are just changing so rapidly these days. So I'm just like really curious and excited for the next 5 to 10 years.
I agree with that. I'm excited for my daughter and daughters-in-law, one soon to be, but they just have so much more information than I ever had, and I'm excited to see how that will help them as they transition through life.
And I think on that note, it would be really good to see that if the work that's kind of been put in now comes off, so that their experience is much more positive, because like I think for all of us, amazing positive stuff has come out of the perimenopause menopause transition. It probably could have been smoother, and had we had more information, but they will have that information. And if we can get to a place where they're like, actually, I'm looking forward to this time, this is going to be really cool, rather than like, oh no, this means I'm getting older and wrinkles and all of that negativity that goes with it. That will be amazing, won't it?
It really, and I'm so grateful that both of you are working so that our future daughters-in-law and nieces and granddaughters and so forth will have a better story to tell. So thank you both for being here today.
Thanks for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. Everyone, you're welcome. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to Hello Hot Flash, where we help you control the midlife change. Make sure to check out the show notes, where we will include links to today's subjects and also links to some of the books that we mentioned. And if you want to discover how to manage your hormones so you can sleep better, have more energy, and manage the weight, take the quiz on hellohotflash.com. It only takes 90 seconds. Thanks again, and here's to your health.